Okay, you can begin.
Is everyone seeing my screen?
Sort of, yeah.
Yes, no. You all seeing it now?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Aikiva Hamilton, and my colleague Crystal and I will be presenting Chapter 5 Understanding Others. Okay, so the objectives that I have before you all today is what we will be investigating. So, firstly, we will be looking at the aspects of ethnicity, gender, and culture, why it is required in understanding others. Secondly, we'll highlight the diverse leadership genres related to understanding others. Thirdly, we will illustrate why communication is essential and how difference in opinions are resolved. And lastly, we'll be looking at the effects decision making has on leadership and understanding others. The first topic that we'll be looking at is individuality and commonality. Individuality refers to the distinctiveness of character one particular person has that separates or sets them apart from others alike. For example, my experiences, values, religion, ethnicity, culture, and sexuality all shape the individual I am today. So, just to give you a further clarification, our experiences in life contribute to the person that we are today, whether it may be through our values instilled in us from a young age, or our ethnical background, or even the doctrine that we adhere to through religion. These all contribute to our individuality in society. However, although all of us are different due to individualism, we are all alike, which brings us to my next point, commonality. Commonality indicates the sharing of similar or common experiences, interests, and traits with others. For example, belonging to the same religion or sharing same beliefs. Another example is when we and our siblings share the same color of hair, this is considered as commonality. Moving on to the next slide. Understanding gender diversity. Gender diversity is a phrase used to depict gender identities, expressions, and roles beyond the binary notion of male and female. In understanding this, we must first ask ourselves, how does my gender influence my mental outlook and demeanor? Secondly, how does my actions as a male or female mold my perspective? And thirdly, how does it shape my perspective of others? With these in mind, we will now take a look at two roles that play a significant part in understanding gender diversity: sex roles and gender roles. Sex roles is the belief developed from biology and practices naturally determined through reproduction. For example, women becoming mothers and men assuming the role of fatherhood. A further example would be because of the male anatomy of a male and a female, society expects that both men and women will fulfill the role and procreate. Secondly, gender roles. Gender roles is the way someone conducts themselves based on his or her appointed sex. For example, women as housewives and men as breadwinner of the household. For a further example is when we look at women in the 1950s, women assumed the roles of housewives, taking care of the home, cooking and cleaning, while the men were the ones who went out, brought home the bacon, as they would say it, and they were also the one that would do the heavy lifting around the house, such as handiwork, etc. Another example of gender roles would be the LGBT community. The LGBT community has various roles that go beyond the role of male and female. When we look at the word queer, queer is used both as an identity and as an umbrella term for non-binary identity, which takes us to our next slide. Understanding cultural diversity. When we think of the word culture, what comes to mind? Anyone?
I'm guess. Oh,
The
sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
So it's the way of living based on a particular country or upbringing.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I believe it's like the behaviors or traditions of a group of people that is generally passed down from generation to generation.
Okay. So we can all agree that culture is a way of life, our customs, traditions, social behaviors of a particular group of people in society. However, cultural diversity is the traits and knowledge of a specific faction who connect on common views and beliefs. It envelopes how people feel and the way they think and behave. For example, religion and language. Within leadership, it is important to be culturally diverse because it opens our eyes to different perspectives and eliminates negative pigeonholes or stereotypes about different groups, and it helps us identify and appreciate norms that are not our own. Now, the pictures that you all see before you all are two prominent cultural ethnicities widely known in Trinidad and Tobago. On the left hand side, the African community is seen celebrating Emancipation Day, and on the left, the Indian community, dressed in saris, are seen celebrating the Hindu the Hindu holiday of Diwali. Understanding international diversity. In understanding international diversity, we must first acknowledge the extensive role it plays on becoming a great leader. Firstly, it empowers leaders with the ability to broaden his or her perspective and experience. It allows employees and clients to be comfortable and communicate effectively, which in turn contributes to the success of the company. Thirdly, it allows management to develop ideas and solutions on a vast spectrum. For example, if a company has a management team hailing from various backgrounds, they are more likely to progress extensively over a wider range. And these are seen through companies such as Johnson& and Johnson, Coca-Cola, and the Marriott Hotel. These companies are known to be multinational workplaces as they extend their workforce around the globe. Understanding cultural heritage. As we know, the world is home to many cultural heritage. Therefore, it is important to educate oneself and on others from different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. Cultural heritage expresses the method of living esta- established by community which is passed on from one generation to the next. This includes their customs, practices, monuments, values, and artifacts. This can also be tangible and intangible. Though it is passed down from our ancestors, it is still present and valued by today's generation. Why is understanding our culture, our heritage important? It is important because it gives us a chance to understand our traditions that are specific to our ancestors. It also gives us a detailed perspective on environmental factors, genetic factors, and its uniqueness. Additionally, some of the intangible cultural heritage are our traditions and our literature, for example, rituals and folklore. Secondly, some of our tangible cultural heritage are our food, monuments such as artifacts left by the Amerindians. The cycle of heritage. This picture that you all see before you, it gives us the idea of once we understand our heritage, we will value it. This means that it becomes more meaningful to us through understanding. Secondly, value. When we value our heritage, we care more for it, meaning because it holds a high regard or of importance, we will want to cherish it, nurture it, and take care of it. Thirdly, caring for our heritage. In caring for it, it helps us to anticipate and seek enjoyment from it. And lastly, enjoyment. Because we care for it, we open our minds to understand and learn more about it, which carries us back to understanding. And now I will hand you over to my colleague, Crystal Campbell, to talk about building multicultural appreciation.
Good afternoon, all. As we proceed further in our presentation this afternoon, right. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about that. As we proceed further in our presentation this afternoon on understanding others, I will first be touching on the subtitle of building multicultural appreciation. In any organization or group, there are leaders, and these leaders are seen as the figurehead. These leaders are required to demonstrate attitudes of candidness, which is a straightforward attitude, and they are required to have respect for the various cultures and how they differ. For emphasis, they basically need to have the knowledge and the skills required to work efficiently and effectively in a multicultural environment. For example, as you know, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we are known to live in a multicultural society. The leaders who hold positions within any organization are deemed to have respect for each and every culture and individual within the establishment. For example, the Hindus during their time of fast and celebration as they prepare for the festivities of Diwali. In cases where leaders are unaware of the norms, practices, beliefs, and the multitude of cultures around them, they go through two phases of transitioning, which is known as the intercultural learning process model. There are two stages to this model. The first stage is the ethnocentrism stage, which is commonly known as the judging stage. The second stage is the stage of transitioning, where the leaders start understanding and becoming aware of other cultures. This stage can be a cultural shock environment for both the leaders and subordinates. Without this transition taking place, many conflicts will arise in the working environment. See the next two slides for visual clarifications. As you see, this is a broad example of what ethnocentrism looks like. And next, this is what the transition stage does in the environment. I now hand you over to Kibo, who will speak on the attitudes towards differences.
Okay, so now we will talk about the attitudes towards differences. When we think about the word differences, we think about how people view others that are different. As we mature from childhood into adulthood, we shift from awareness to acceptance. For example, I'm sure this happened to many of us where we say to ourselves sometimes, if I had only known better, I would have made a better decision, but the only way we are able to do that is after the deed was already done, right? So, this is an example of that. And sorry, but because of time, we aren't allowed to go back and alter the past. But presently, it is up to us to do better and ensure that past experiences do not reoccur. Thirdly, As the years progress, we are able to learn through favorable and unfavorable experiences. For example, when we think about favorable and unfavorable experiences, for me, I would say let's think about um, we have two friends, and those two friends we are always like lending something to them, whether it be money, clothing, etc. If one particular friend is always delivering on time, then we will always feel comfortable to lend whatever it may be to that particular friend again. But on the other hand, if we have another friend who is unable to do the same, whether it is delivering whatever we ask of them late, then we will not feel comfortable in lending them whatever it is, again, whether it be money, etc. So that is just an example of a favorable and unfavorable experience. Experiences can often lead to homophobia, sexism, dislike, and racism. The Riddle Scale. The Riddle Scale was developed by Dr. Dorothy Riddle, and she used the scale to help us understand attitudes towards gays and lesbians and how they were treated and how people viewed them. As you can see in the picture before you, there are 8 words: repulsion, pity, tolerance, acceptance, support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance. The first 4 words that you see before you are considered as the negatives, and the second 4 words are considered as the positives. Firstly, we will be taking a look at the negatives. Repulsion. When we think of the word repulsion, repulsion is when someone look at these individuals, the gays, the lesbians, anyone in the LGBT community, they look at these individuals with disgust or distaste. In simple terms, we would view them as being sick or strange. This is a result of taken up, which takes away from the norm or customs of society. And because of this, the people normally view them like that because they aren't accustomed to individuals of the gay and lesbian community. Secondly, pity. Pity to some, they would, some people may view them with compassion because they may see the gays as someone who was born that way. We always hear some people in the gay community saying they were born that way. That moves us on to tolerance. Tolerance. A perfect example of tolerance is some of us may have an individual, let's just say a sibling or a family member who we just can't stand, or their behavior, it don't mesh with us, we dislike it, right? Or we disagree with it. This is an example of tolerance. We might not like it, but we deal with it. Acceptance. Acceptance on the Riddle scale is used for, in the LGBT community, the word acceptance means that people need to make room or accommodation for those that are different. Support. Now we're moving on to the positive attitudes. Support in this context means helping those who are different from us. For example, we see a lot of people in the United States turning out for the Gay Pride Day. So that will be considered as support for them. Secondly, admiration. Admiration here means having a level of respect and appreciation for those who stand out in society. Appreciation. Appreciation recognizes the value in diversity among others. And lastly, nurturance. Nurturance is expressing genuine affection and care to others that are different from us. Now we'll be moving on to cultural influences on leadership behavior. When we think of culture, these are some of the words that come to mind. But today we'll be looking at food, music, and clothing. Firstly, in the picture here before you, you will see Super Blue and Ravioli. When we think about music, it is home to various genres. For example, in this picture here, it shows a collaboration between Super Blue, who sings soca, and Rafi B, who sings chutney. This shows the two genres coming together and helping to shape culture. Secondly, we'll be moving on to food. For example, this is a picture of doubles. Most of us eat it and enjoy it. And this is because of the East Indian community contribution. And lastly, in this picture here, you will see a nice, juicy, delicious plate of pilau, which is a nation's favorite and similar to the African jollof rice, which was brought by the African community. Aspects of culture. Culture, firstly, is learned. So, how would we say culture is learned? Culture is learned when families, peers, and institutions pass it down. Secondly, culture is shared. For example, an example of culture being shared is now that we're in the Christmas season, a lot of us may be indulging in some sorrel, panchakrem, etc. And we can all say that all our families may have a specific ingredient that they may add that was hand down through generation to generation. So that is how you could say culture is shared. Thirdly, culture is significant. Culture is significant because it includes the conception of good and evil. And lastly, culture is unified. When one person from one culture adapts the practices from one culture without reducing their own, for example, many of us may adapt the Diwali tradition during that season, although many of us are not Hindus. So that is an example of how culture is unified. And now I'll be handing you back over to Crystal.
There are three ways leadership behavior are influenced by culture, and they are as follows. One, through communication. As we all are aware, communication is key in every environment. Although it is essential, it can be misinterpreted by persons outside of those cultures or customs when communicating in a group. Therefore, As a leader, you are required to understand the cultural practices of those around you. For instance, did you know that the sign that we use as okay the sign that we use as okay on WhatsApp, or the hand gesture we show to each other, which we perceive it to mean good or everything is good or okay, right, is a sign in Germany that can be imposed as being rude or an obscene in Greece. Here are a few others hand signals used in the wide society that are conveyed differently in other countries. As you can see, the thumbs up, it means okay in Australia, Iran, and so forth, but it can be offensive in Nigeria. The commonly stop hand signal that is used can also mean you get nothing from me in Turkey. And this fig signal, well, hand signal or gesture, in Russia, it means you get nothing from me, where in Brazil, it means good luck. Since behavior grows from complex interaction to many salient background factors, it is useful to observe that people's behavior and seeking understanding of their attitudes. One aspect of communication that was found useful was speech community. One can recognize and respect different speech communities. Once you can recognize and respect different speech communities, it will increase the ability to participate in a diverse culture, right? An example for this would be, for instance, in my community, there are many old groups that participate in All For March. When a new or young person come to partake in this activity or in this grouping, usually this new person is lost without insight and given insight on the rules and signals, hand gestures, symbols, and so forth used for the game. This new person will be unaware. Secondly, conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is a key and essential aspect of rational leadership. In any organization, rational leadership is required when dealing with conflict resolution. To ensure that members are focused, leaders should be virtuous and inclusive. It is required that these positive relationships are maintained within a group. Thirdly, leaders are required to undergo the decision-making process. Although leaders use the decision-making process to make decisions, the way it is executed reflects those that value power, prefer voting, or seek inclusion on the minority opinions and value consensus. This is an example of the decision-making process which leaders will use before making a decision. Leadership and communication. Communication is a core leadership function which involves conversation, writing, and listening. It is essential that leaders are empathic communicators. Assertive communication. Assertive communication is the balance between aggressive and passive communication. This is accomplished by the use of the 3 C's, which are confidence, where the leader believes in the ability to accomplish the given task or duty; clarity, where the information is communicated clearly; and control, by having the ability to convey information in a calm and controlled manner. This is a depiction of the ways that communication takes place in the 3 forms of aggressive communication, passive communication, and assertive communication. Aggressive communication, this is what you're going to do and what you say. Passive communication, what you say, I'll do, whether I want to or not. And assertive communication, this is important to you. It is also important to me. Let's figure out some option that are fair to both of us. Relational empathy. Relational empathy is defined as the ability to do the following: understand the perspectives and emotions of others, understand and check its validity, and act on what you understand about the individual. In summary, accepting the authority of a cultural tradition and legacy, gender, and other elements of our differences aids us to communicate and work together towards transition and shared compliance. These are the list of our references that were used, and we now open the forum for questions.
Any questions?
All right, if there are no questions, I'll pause the recording now.